Hi, I'm Eliza, and today I want to talk about some of the books that I've read recently. It's been quite a while since I've done a video like this, so I have quite a few books to talk about. I have Goodreads up on my phone, as always, and I also have a few notes here as well. So let's dive straight in. Okay. The first book that I read since I last spoke to you was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, which is the first book in a trilogy, which also has the book Bring Up the Bodies, which is another quite well-known book. I think both Bring Up the Bodies and Wolf Hall won the Booker Prize. And this book is a historical fiction about Henry VIII as he is trying to divorce Catherine of Aragon in order to marry Anne Boleyn. But it's told from the perspective of Thomas Cromwell, who is a man from humble beginnings who kind of rises to eventually become one of the king's top advisors. So I gave this book 3 stars. It was a difficult book to rank. I did enjoy parts of it. The writing style at parts was it can be very poetic, it's very lavish. There were lots of bits that I wanted to underline. But at the same time, I didn't find it a very easy book to get into. Part of that was because of the writing style. The author tends to do this thing where Thomas Cromwell is always referred to as he and never his name. And so, especially at the beginning, before I really understood this, then there were lots of instances that I didn't know who was speaking or who the author was talking about. And then it took me about 100 pages to realize that he always referred to Cromwell. And once I understood that, then it was easier to follow the book. But I still didn't really feel connected to any of the characters. There are loads of characters, and there's a big list of characters at the start of the book, which was really necessary. And I had to flick back to that list of characters all the time. And so maybe because there are so many characters, then it was hard to really connect to any of them. The only person that we really get a chance to know anything about is Cromwell, but even he, I feel like, is always kind of held at an arm's length from us, and we never really know his thoughts or his motivations. So yeah, this book was a mixed bag for me. But I also think that part of the reason why I didn't enjoy this book that much is just because I didn't have enough time to read it. Because I got this book out of the library and someone else had requested it after me, so I couldn't renew it. So I had like 2 weeks to read this book, and for me, that just wasn't enough time. I think this is the kind of book that needs time to really sit with it and understand it and enjoy it slowly, because the writing style is really beautiful, but it's not very fast paced or plot driven. It's a book that I think needs to be absorbed slowly. So I will read the next books in this series, and I'll try to allow myself more time to do so. The next book that I read was Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh, and I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. Trainspotting, it's set in Scotland, in Edinburgh, in I think the 70s or 80s, and it follows a group of friends. Many of them are heroin addicts, and the book kind of tells their interconnected life stories. There isn't a lot of plot per se. It's more of a character study, and there is some plot, and I thought that the ending was really, really great. Overall this book, it was so funny while still being very dark and gritty. Overall, I had such a great time reading it. I listened to the audiobook, which I thought was very well narrated. I just listened to it on Spotify, and yeah, I would highly recommend this book, but I wouldn't recommend this book if you are squeamish. There are lots of bits which are very gross and there's also quite graphic descriptions of drug abuse, and definitely read the trigger warnings before you read this book. I will also say that it is written and narrated in a Scots dialect, so that can be a little bit difficult to get into, and especially if English isn't your first language, then you might struggle with this. But it's something that gets easier the more you get into it, because you get used to it and you start to understand what the slang means and everything like that. So yeah, I would highly recommend Trainspotting. I haven't seen the film, so I don't know how close it is to the book, but I will probably give the film a watch. I think that Irvine Welsh does a really good job of making you relate to these characters, even though they are so flawed. So yes, I thoroughly enjoyed Trainspotting. The next book that I read was actually a poetry collection by Wendy Cope. It's called The Orange and Other Poems, and this is a very funny and heartfelt poetry collection. I think that this is a very accessible poetry collection if you are someone who thinks that you don't like poetry or thinks that you don't understand poetry. I think that this is a good way to dip your toes into poetry. A lot of her poems are about kind of the everyday, and I think it's quite accessible. I'm going to find one of her poems to read out loud. I'll read The Orange, which I think is the poem that the collection is named after, and it's, I think, Wendy Cope's most famous poem. So let me find it. Okay. The Orange. At lunchtime I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarters and I had a half. And that orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do just lately. The shopping, a walk in the park, this is peace and contentment. It's new. The rest of the day was quite easy. I did all the jobs on my list and enjoyed them and had some time over. I love you. I'm glad I exist. That's just a sweet poem from the collection. The next book that I read was The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, and this is a book set in alternative 1960s USA, if the Axis powers won World War II. So it's in the USA. The USA is split, and it is occupied by Imperial Japan in the west and Nazi Germany in the east. And this book, it's quite a strange book, to be honest. I found it quite strange. It's very surreal and kind of dreamlike, and I don't think it was really for me. I found the ideas that it brought up interesting. It brings up ideas of truth and authenticity and destiny compared to free will or chance, and the idea of dystopia in general. So it was more of an ideas book rather than a plot or character development book. But for me, the ideas, although they were interesting, it wasn't enough for me to really be invested in the book or to enjoy the book. I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't really care what happened to them. I didn't think the plot made a lot of sense necessarily. Overall, I didn't love it. I think I gave it 2 stars. But if you are someone who enjoys kind of surreal and absurd books, then this might be for you. But it wasn't for me. The next book that I read was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and I listened to this audiobook on a long train ride, and it was a great time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also didn't know actually that the book was based on the original radio show, so maybe I should have just listened to the radio show instead of listening to the audiobook. But I really enjoyed it either way. It's very funny, very witty. It's kind of this adventure, this sci-fi adventure, and it was very funny. I know that I enjoyed it, and I know it made my train ride go very quickly, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't really feel like I remember it very well. So I guess maybe it didn't stick with me, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Let me see if I have any other notes about it. No, that was it. My notes just say that it was funny, witty, British. It was quite British, the humour and the content. Okay. The next book that I read was Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, and I loved this book. Apparently I only gave this book 4 stars, but maybe I want to give it 5 stars. I'm not sure. I found this book in a charity shop, and the books that I had been reading for a while before this point felt quite male-centric, and so I was wanting to find a sapphic love story, and I saw this book in the charity shop, and it was exactly what I was after. It is a lesbian cult classic. It is it's set in the 1890s. Yeah, the 1890s, maybe the 1880s and the 1890s. Anyway, it's about a young woman who goes to the music hall and sees there a masher called Kitty, and a masher is a male impersonator, so it was a woman who dressed up as a man and sang and parodied men on stage like a drag king, basically. And so this girl sees Kitty on stage and becomes infatuated with her, obsessed with her, falls in love with her, and then they become friends. And the main character, Nancy, she follows Kitty to London, and then a whole saga ensues. But I really enjoyed this book. It's about love and desire, and it's about gender and gender expression and gender as a performance. It's tied to the theatre and how we perform our gender expression, basically. And it was just a really fun romp, basically. I will say that I wouldn't recommend this book if you are easily frustrated by main characters making bad decisions, because the main character can be quite insufferable and she makes some very bad choices. So if that's something that frustrates you, then I wouldn't recommend this book. I would also say to read the trigger warnings, and there is also some smut. So if that's not something that you want to read, then I would give this book a miss. It's not really smutty, but it's definitely there. So yeah, just to be aware of. Okay. The next book that I read was Word Slut by Amanda Montell. I loved this book. I found it so interesting and so engaging. It's a non-fiction book. It's about linguistics and gender and how men and women use language, and the way that language can be used against women in particular. And it's written in a very engaging style. It's not a stuffy non-fiction book at all. I listened to the audiobook of this as well, and it's narrated by the author, which I really like because I feel like I can really connect to it. I would definitely recommend this book if you are interested in linguistics and feminism. I will say that I don't think this book goes into a lot of depth or a lot of detail. So if you are already someone who knows a lot about linguistics, then this book probably won't tell you anything new. But as an introduction, then I think this is a really great place to start. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun and really interesting. The next book that I read was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Aldous. It's spelled Aldous. Aldous Huxley. And it says, Aldous Huxley's profoundly important classic of world literature, Brave New World, is a searching vision of an unequal, technologically advanced future where humans are genetically bred, socially indoctrinated, and pharmaceutically anesthetized to passively uphold an authoritarian ruling order, all at the cost of our freedom, full humanity, and perhaps also our souls. So this book was kind of similar to Man in the High Castle in that it brought up a lot of interesting ideas, but I wasn't really engaged with the plot or connected to the characters at all. Although I did enjoy this book a lot more than I enjoyed The Man at the High Castle, so I will say that. And it brings up the question of happiness and this society which values happiness above all else, and how much are we willing to sacrifice happiness for freedom or sacrifice freedom for happiness. And I found it really interesting. It also reminded me a lot of Fahrenheit 451, the ideas about consumerism and the media, I think, were quite similar. It brought up similar ideas to that, so that would be, I think they'd be interesting books to read together and compare. overall, I gave this book, I think, 3 or 4 stars. I did enjoy reading it, but I didn't feel, like I said, I didn't feel connected to the characters or the plot, and I found the ending quite frustrating. And I also don't know if it's a very good depiction of women. I found the role of women quite frustrating, I suppose. But I would say it's worth a read. I think it's also quite a short book. And it's a classic. I haven't read, so now I've read Brave New World and Fahrenheit 451 and Man in the High Castle, which are quite classic dystopia novels, but I haven't read 1984, so that's one that I'll add to my reading list soon. The next book that I read was Autumn by Ali Smith. I thought that now was a good time of the year to read it, and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about Ali Smith, but she's a really wonderful author, and she kind of reminds me of Sally Rooney, which is very high praise because I'm a very big Sally Rooney fan. So now I'm worried that I've said that you'll be disappointed. But that is who she reminds me of. So Autumn is the first part of a seasonal quartet. So there's autumn, winter, spring, and summer. And Autumn itself was quite a strange book. It's about a young woman and her elderly neighbour, or a man who used to be her neighbour but is now in a care home, and he's dying of old age, and he spends most of his time asleep, and the book flicks between the young woman, I forgot her name now, but the young woman and then the elderly man in his dreams. So you get a lot of chapters which are just Daniel's dreams, so it gives the book a very dream-like, surreal feeling, and then there are also some funny bits. There are some bits which are very rooted in the real world. It's also about Brexit, and it's about political scandals and truth, and especially truth from politicians. It's quite a specific book in a way, because I think that it is a lot about Brexit, and which was something that resonated with me because it's something that I remember so clearly. The Brexit referendum was the first time that I could vote, so it was the first thing that I voted in, and I also was one of the people counting the votes, so it was quite impactful for me. So I would be interested in hearing what someone from another country, maybe someone who doesn't have such a strong memory or feeling about Brexit, I would be interested in knowing what this book brings up for you. This isn't my favourite book that I've read. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I didn't love it as much as I had hoped I would, as much as I've loved some of Ali Smith's other books. But I will read the next books in the quartet, and I'll let you know if I like those any better. And then the final book that I've read recently was Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell, and this is about Shakespeare's son called Hamlet, who died of the plague when he was 11 or so, and it's mainly about his mother, and it's quite a long, meandering kind of book. I've read some of the reviews on Goodreads, and people either really love the writing style or they hate it. It is very flowery, very embellished, very over the top. When Maggie O'Farrell could use one adjective, she uses three. When she could use one metaphor or one simile, she'll use three. I didn't mind this, it didn't annoy me, but I do think that the whole book could have been 200 pages shorter and I wouldn't have minded. I didn't love it, but I enjoyed it a lot as well. So I gave it 4 stars, maybe 3 or 4 stars. Yes, so those were all of the books that I've read recently, and I'll try to make the next of these kind of videos not so far in the future, so that I can talk a little bit longer about each book. But I hope that this gives you some reading inspiration. If you have any book recommendations for me, let me know. And yeah, thank you for spending this time with me, and I will see you soon.